NXT. I'm an NXT core developer, responsible for the development of the NXT blockchain. And in this, hopefully, quick lecture, I'll talk about why you should consider developing your next blockchain application using NXT and not using some other blockchain technology. So the session is laid out as a Q&A session between Alice and Bob, where Alice is an advisor and Bob is the one who wants to develop a blockchain application. So let's try to help Bob to decide. So first of all, I think the first natural choice would be to start with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the most established, highest value, most mature blockchain. However, Bitcoin is problematic in the sense that it's not designed for extensibility. It's true that at some point they added the OP return that gives you a few bytes where you can squeeze your custom messages and somehow package it into an application, and many people are doing that successfully, but it's very awkward to develop and store information in the Bitcoin blockchain itself. Okay, so as a result, what people do, and we see it hundreds of those, they just take Bitcoin and clone it. They clone it and change something. Okay, but this, especially for businesses, this is problematic. So the idea is that you clone Bitcoin, but Bitcoin needs to be mined. It's mined by finding the hash values that solves the next block. So it's kind of a competition. But for a business setup, for a business application, this competition does not make sense because there is no sense to give your users ASIC boxes and let them solve hashes. It doesn't make any sense. And so what some companies, startups try to do is say, okay, clone Bitcoin, use something like Bitcoin, but do not use the consensus algorithm. Do not use mining. Instead, implement something like round robin. This is problematic. This is problematic because the consensus algorithm is the most important thing in a blockchain. Okay. Otherwise, if you do something wrong, you lose all the security and reliability of the blockchain. Okay. So trying to replace the Bitcoin algorithm is very difficult. So, okay. Fine, so, okay, one more try. Oh, okay. Okay, so I'd like to introduce you to another option. So I'd like you to introduce you to NXT. But maybe before we start with NXT, let's talk a little bit about the big elephant in the room, which is Ethereum, okay? Because Ethereum became very popular recently, and what Ethereum does is it allows you to develop whichever application you want by writing these smart contracts. And we actually had a slide about Ethereum and smart contracts. And they said, well, maybe let's leave it out because it will piss off someone. The philosophy of NXT and Ethereum is different, as we discussed. I think that there was a question before about if Ethereum solves the blockchain bloat, and because it uses smart contracts, there is really no no connection between these two things. In Ethereum, you first of all, if you work with Ethereum, you need to develop a smart contract. That must be simple, right? In fact, it's very, very difficult, okay? Because you have to, first of all, you need to program it according to the rules that Ethereum set. Then there are many things that you're not allowed to do or need to be very careful in the way you're doing. Otherwise, your blockchain cannot reach consensus and you can fork your blockchain. So developing smart contracts is very, very hard, okay? We have to understand that. It's doable. People will do it. People will use Ethereum, but it's not justified for every application, okay? So what we provide you with NXT is the building blocks of smart contracts. We allow you to send, and I'm talking about built-in features with user interface, with well-defined APIs that you saw in my previous lecture. You can automatically, out of the box, you can send encrypted messages, non-encrypted messages, alias, that's name registry, cloud data that allow you to store anything up to 40K in any block that you like. Think about documents, encrypted documents. Account properties is a very strong feature that allows one account to tag another account. Think about a whitelisting accounts, KYC, grouping account for role-based authentication, things like that. We also have phase transactions, which is kind of, think about Bitcoin multisig, but with much more flexibility. I already talked about this, that you issue a conditional transaction and then vote about it using voting models. Okay. So on top of these building blocks, we already created the most common smart contracts for asset exchange and monetary system, which are basically two different types of tokens that you can issue on top of the blockchain. Marketplace on top of the blockchain. The voting systems that I talked about in my previous lecture. And this is all working live on our mainnet. It's not a smart contract that you need to develop. It's already live. You have the API. You can use it today. We have state-of-the-art cryptography and privacy features on the same level of everything you have from other blockchains, at least. We also provide simple to use and well-documented APIs based on HTTP and JSON, exactly like you expect. Therefore, when you develop applications for NXT, you could focus on your business needs and not about the infrastructure. Okay, the blockchain is written in Java, and therefore it's very simple for people to clone it and customize it. Okay, and then we have a plan how to solve the blockchain bloat. Bloat is a very big problem in blockchain, and I mean, when you talk about bloat in the context of Bitcoin, you think about the size of the blockchain on the disk. 60 gigabytes, that's scary. But this is not the really scary part. The scary part is that when you boot a new node, you need to actually download the whole blockchain from the beginning and revalidate everything, including, think about it, all these transactions that nobody cared about. Your donation to Wikipedia 2 years ago, why do we need to validate this again and again and again? So the idea in NXT is that we make, we call it it's what we call prunable transactions. The idea is that once a transaction is no longer relevant, you no longer need to store it forever in the blockchain. You can actually cut it off from the blockchain, and the consensus is based on that you believe that at the time that the transaction existed, it was validated by the nodes. The idea going forward is that to have one blockchain, which is actually used, what we use for forging, like mining in Bitcoin, this blockchain will only be used for forging and the relevant actions. All the rest of the more complex operations are going to move into side chains. We call them child chains. Okay, and these child chains will be prunable, so that you can now spawn a child chain for your business, for your voting, for your school, and these blockchains will be validated by the main chain, but the blockchains themselves will be prunable. They will be cut off after 1 day or so. If you really want to save everything and still have all the full transaction history, you'll still be able to do this using what we call archival nodes, but you won't have to do it, and this won't be part of the consensus. Okay, so this is our plan to solve the blockchain bloat. According to our calculations, we can reduce blockchain size by a factor of up to 80. Okay, so think about Bitcoin today, instead of 60 gigabyte, less than 1 gigabyte. Okay, because right now the way the blockchain growth of Bitcoin, Ethereum, NXT is non-sustainable. It's not something that can reach global scale. Okay, so I'll leave time for questions later. So who are we, NXT? NXT is not a business. It's a community which uses the blockchain technology to develop decentralized applications. In other words, we eat our own dog food. Decentralized community for developing decentralized applications. Okay, questions?
Hi, my name is Yaffe. I'm active in the emerging economy, so maybe I misunderstood you, but you talked about rural authentication. Is that something you talked about in some minutes ago?
About what?
Rural authentication. Rural, so in agricultural areas.
Not specifically, no. No, I talked about role-based authentication. That's what I said. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd like to suggest that we take most of the questions on this session and answer them a little bit later, because we're short for time, and we're going to move on to the next speaker. Is production TV ready? So I'd like to now introduce our visitors from Russia, who are going to give a short talk explaining what the digital currency revolution is like in that part of the world. The gentlemen that are going to tell their story were involved in. They're actually the team that created the documentary about digital currency in Russia called Cryptocurrency, the gold of the digital age. And while they're here now to tell you what the scene is actually like firsthand. Please let's give them a round of applause.